The Man Without a Body. The Man Without a Body, also known as Curse of Nostradamus, is a low-budget 1957 British horror film, produced by Guido Coen and directed by Charles Saunders and W. Lee Wilder. It stars Robert Hutton, George Coulouris, Julia Arnall and Nadja Regin. The screenplay concerns a wealthy American man with a brain tumor who plans to replace his brain with that of Nostradamus. The film was released theatrically in England in 1957 on a double bill with the Japanese film Half Human 1958, and a year later in the US on a double bill with Fright 1956. Plot: wealthy, vain New York City businessman Carl Brussard George Coulouris, behaving oddly, answering telephones that aren't ringing, forgetting that he owns ships in Miami, failing to recognize his own physician, Dr. Charrot William Sherwood. Charrot shows Brussard an X-ray of his head. Brussard looks at it admiringly and says, "Ah, beautiful, the brain of Carl Brussard." But Charrot tells him that he has an inoperable brain tumor and advises him to go to England, where Dr. Phil Merritt Robert Hutton is researching brain transplantation. Brussard and his much younger companion, Odette Vernet Nadja Regin, leave at once. Brussard meets Merritt, his nurse Jean Kramer, Julia Arnall, and Dr. Lou Waldenhouse Sheldon Lawrence in London. Merritt confirms Charrot's diagnosis, but Brussard is more interested in the living monkey's head that he's seen in Merritt's laboratory. Merritt explains that its brain came from a monkey, which had been dead for 6 years, and that he and his staff revitalized the brain and implanted it into the head. Merritt says that the brain will change its personality to the one the monkey formerly had. Brussard decides that he needs a new brain, and, during a visit to Madame Tussaud's wax museum, learns of Nostradamus. Brussard hires the drunken Dr. Brandon Tony Quinn, and they go to France, open Nostradamus' crypt, and steal his head. Brussard takes it to Merritt's lab. Without knowing whose head it is, Merritt's staff revitalize it. Brussard, who hasn't been told of this development, goes to the lab alone and finds the head, exclaiming, "It's alive! My brain! It's alive!" When Merritt tries to force him out of the lab, Brussard, in a rage, accuses Merritt of trying to kill him and damages the omnigizer, a vital piece of medical equipment. After Jean repairs the omnigizer, the head speaks, identifying itself as Mitchell de Notre Dame. "It's Nostradamus!" exclaims Merritt. He, Jean, and Lou tell Nostradamus that his predictions have come true. "A great mind that can see into the future," declares Brussard. "Worthy to be Carl Brussard." When told that he's alive again, Nostradamus says it's against nature and asks, "Why have you done this?" Brussard answers by yelling at Nostradamus, telling him that he, Nostradamus, is now him, Brussard. Later, a mentally confused Brussard asks Nostradamus what he should do with his oil stocks. Nostradamus, knowing that stock prices are dropping, deliberately tells him to sell. Brussard does and is financially ruined. Odette, meanwhile, has been secretly dating Lou. Brussard discovers the affair, follows her to Lou's flat, and strangles her. Lou arrives and finds Odette's body. Brussard, who has been hiding in another room, steps out, revolver in hand. Lou runs for his life, Brussard in pursuit. Lou goes to the lab and Brussard shoots him in the back, then flees. Merritt examines Lou and says that his cranial nerves have been severed. He tells a police detective, Frank Forsyth, that Lou can't be saved. Brussard returns and shoots Nostradamus' head. Merritt decides to attach Nostradamus' head to Lou's body in an attempt to save them both. Brussard returns again and discovers that Lou has become a monster, with Nostradamus' head encased in what appears to be a shoulder-width box covered with surgical tape. Brussard runs away, Nostradamus wanders off. Merritt calls Dr. Alexander Norman Shelley and tells him that Nostradamus seems demented and has lost the power of speech. But then the police spot Nostradamus. Merritt and Jean run to a building with a bell tower and find Brossard chasing Nostradamus up a staircase. Brossard becomes dizzy and falls to his death. The bells begin to ring and Lou's body comes crashing down, leaving Nostradamus' head dangling in the bell ropes. Cast: Robert Hutton, Dr. Phil R. Merritt, George Coulouris, Carl Brossard, Julia Arnall, Jean Kramer, Nadja Regin, Odette Vernet, Sheldon Lawrence, Dr. Lou Waldenhouse, Peter Copley, Leslie, Michael Golden, Mitchell de Notre Dame Nostradamus, Norman Shelley, Dr. Alexander, Stanley Van Beers, Madame Tussaud's Guide, Tony Quinn, 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 Dr. Brandon, Morris Kaufman, Chauffeur, 4, William Sherwood, Dr. Charot, Edwin Ellis, Publican, Donald Morley, Stockbroker, Frank Forsyth, Detective, Kim Parker, Maid Suzanne, Ernest Bale, Customs Officer. Production: the film was partly financed from the National Film Finance Corporation (NFFC). The directing credit was shared between Wilder and Saunders to ensure funding from the Eady levy, which was paid by distributors to filmmakers in order to assure that British actors and production people would be employed, although in reality Wilder did most of the directing. Star Robert Hutton said in an interview that he remembers Saunders being on the set all the time and not doing anything. To satisfy the union, they had to hire an English director because of the rules. Shooting took place over 3 weeks. The film's budget of PS 20,000 was meager, but enough for Twickenham Studios to be booked and Filmways Limited to be established as the production company. The Man Without a Body was filmed in 1956. Outside the studio, locations around London included the interior of Madame Tussaud's Wax Museum. It is the only film credited to Filmways Limited. Release: the film was paired in the UK with the Japanese film Half Human 1958. In the US it shared a double bill with Fright 1956. The press book for The Man Without a Body and Fright called the pairing the twin terror show that tops them all. British movie posters promised audiences science's most terrifying experiment, while American audiences were teased by posters that claimed a diabolical dream come true. The Man Without a Body was given an X certificate by the British Board of Film Censors BBFC when it was released in the UK, which meant it was suitable for exhibition only to people aged 16 or over. The rating was a deliberate maneuver on the part of its distributor, Eros Films, which sought out horror films, imported movies, and other films aimed at young adults that could get an X cert in order to exploit the market for such films. The exact date of the American release is unclear. The Internet Movie Database in DB only states 1958, and the Turner Classic Movies Database TCMDB gives a date of January 1958. Film critic Bill Warren writes that the film was released in 1959. None specify an exact day. The Man Without a Body opened in the UK in May 1957, again without a specific day being noted, and in West Germany, specifically, on 1 May 1959. It was later shown as part of the Night Visions Film Festival in Helsinki, Finland on 31 March 2007. Bud Rogers Releasing Corporation was responsible for theatrical distribution in the U.S. The Man Without a Body has had only a limited release for individual home viewing. The only reference to home distribution that could be found was for a release on VHS by Cinefear in the US, without a year designated. The film has had only limited American television exposure. All or parts of it were shown in 1978, 1979, and 1980 on TJ and the All Night Theater, telecast on Friday nights by a local TV station in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The station broadcast 247 episodes of the program during the 1970s and 1980s. A poster of the movie is displayed in Inside the Tower, a documentary released in the UK on 2 November 2015. A DVD of the documentary was distributed worldwide by Odeon Entertainment the same year. Critical reception. American critical reception of The Man Without a Body is somewhat difficult to judge because of a paucity of reviews. While Warren notes that reviews are scarce, he is nevertheless able to refer to a handful of contemporary reviews. According to him, the Monthly Film Bulletin said that the movie's script, direction, and playing are banal and amateurish. He also comments that Don Willis, in his book Horror and Science Fiction Films, wrote that its fancy directorial touches were wasted on a story which reaches awesome heights of ludicrousness, and that in A Heritage of Horror, British author David Peary called the film a particularly ludicrous piece. British critic John Hamilton calls the movie a confusing and confused tale, citing its lack of logical plotting and paper-thin characterization and its unintentionally hilarious script. He writes that the film managed to slip below the radar of most film reviewers in the UK, then sank without a trace. Another British critic, Phil Hardy, writes that the direction by Saunders and Wilder, the brother of Billy, is decidedly pedestrian, but the delirium of the central idea survives even its awkward articulation. The film, though not a great financial success, sparked off a number of similar reanimated Head films, including the West German The Head 1959 and the American fantasy The Thing That Couldn't Die 1958. The reanimated Head of Nostradamus is cause for scorn, both from actors and critics. Hutton said in an interview that he and the other actors felt stupid talking to the head. We would almost break up. The actor was underneath the table, with his head stuck up through a hole in the table top. Warren writes that as Nostradamus, Michael Golden has little to do except poke his head through a hole in the table and talk, and even then many of the shots of the prophet's head are of a dummy cranium, obviously not golden. The topics the actors discuss with the head are regarded as dubious as well, with Hardy saying that the high point of the film is an extended debate between Coulouris and Nostradamus' head in which the pair harangue each other, Nostradamus finding the purpose for which he's been reanimated too petty. Elsewise, Warren calls the cinematography murky, uninteresting, and highly variable. He says that the sets are drab and that the film drags itself from scene to scene. He calls the acting either non-existent or terrible or, in the case of Coulouris, so far over the top as to make it hard to imagine the actor took the proceedings seriously. In summary, Warren writes that The Man Without a Body isn't just bad, it's colorfully, almost surrealistically bad, worthy of inclusion on almost any list of impressively awful movies. The most positive comment about the film that could be found is from British academic film scholars Stephen Chibnall and Brian McFarlane, who call it entertainingly absurd.